media for the latest in news and politics in South Africa. Like and follow our page on Facebook. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything. Be part of the conversation. Tell us what you think in the comment section. And please like and share our videos with your friends and family. The next broadcast will start shortly. If you care about South Africa and want to make a positive difference, then join the DA. Visit our website at da.org.za for more information. Find out who represents you in your ward and district, and who are the DA mayors working for you in your town or city, and which MPs represent you and your causes in Parliament. On our website, you can learn more about our latest campaigns and how you can get involved. Join the Democratic Alliance to rescue South Africa. Become an activist, become a councillor, become a member of Parliament if you care about South Africa. Please visit donate.da.org.za. Donate to a cause you believe in. Donate to make a difference. Did you know the best run municipalities in South Africa are all governed by the DA? DA mayors are working hard to protect residents from national government failures by getting the basics right, delivering better services, and having zero tolerance for corruption. This is the DA difference. The next broadcast will start shortly. Follow us on social media for the latest in news and politics in South Africa. Like and follow our page on Facebook. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything. Be part of the conversation. Tell us what you think in the comment section. And please like and share our videos with your friends and family. The next broadcast will start shortly. If you care about South Africa and want to make a positive difference, then join the DA. Visit our website at da.org.za for more information. Find out who represents you in your ward and district, and who are the DA mayors working for you in your town or city, and which MPs represent you and your causes in Parliament. On our website, you can learn more about our latest campaigns and how you can get involved. Join the Democratic Alliance to rescue South Africa. Become an activist, become a councillor, become a member of Parliament if you care about South Africa. Please visit donate.da.org.za. Donate to a cause you believe in. Donate to make a difference. Let's rescue South Africa. Join the DA, because the DA gets things done.
Good morning, South Africa. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Karaba Khakha. I'm the DA's national spokesperson. I want to take an opportunity to each and every one of you joining us here in the room to say thank you for being here. And for those of you joining online, thank you for tuning in. Now, colleagues, the purpose of today is very strict. We, as the Democratic Alliance, are going to be tabling our anti-extortion plan. And joining me to do so today is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police, that is Ian Cameron, who's our lead communications person on police. We're also joined by our DA colleagues in the Portfolio Committee on Police, that is Diane Collar-Barnett MP, as well as Lisa Schickling MP. Now, colleagues, it's very clear to understand why we're here today and why it's important for us as the Democratic Alliance to deliver a plan. Quite frankly, extortion is a criminal tax system on honest businesses, and we cannot sit back and do nothing about that. See, it doesn't just start with a CBD nighttime economy, but it goes all the way to an illicit firearm economy, a construction mafia economy, an illicit drug economy, a taxi extortion economy, a township extortion economy, and all of these have webs of networks involved in armed robberies. Now, that's very clearly an indication that this affects each and every one of ours' daily lives, and it is time that the South African government, particularly the Ministry of Police, that it does something about it to tackle it. But we have that plan, and we're going to unpack it today. I'm first going to hand over to Ian for him to give us communication on how exactly we intend to do this. Ian?
Thank you, Karabo. As I start, I think it's important to give a little bit of context as to what the extortion crisis looks like in South Africa. Now, recently, we heard of a doctor in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape, Dr. Anele Yoko, who actually had to close an ophthalmology practice because of being forced to pay protection money. And if that doctor didn't pay, they would have killed him. He eventually didn't pay, but that forced him to close the practice. So it's becoming so serious that even medical care will be denied because of, as Karabo said, these criminals that I like to call tax pirates, because that is exactly what they have become. This is one of many medical practices that have been closed down, and it's just one of the focus areas of these construction, extortion, medical mafias. There's so many we can call them. I think it's critical that we understand that extortion is escalating so fast because of several reasons, and we're going to touch on some of those today. But one of them that's important to understand is that it's really become a very lucrative business opportunity for criminals, because legislation doesn't really ensure any kind of very serious punishment. And even when you are caught, chances of prosecution are extremely low. And I want to give you a few examples. So according to the South African Police Service, between 2019 and 2024, approximately 6,000 extortion cases were reported across the country. Now, those increase almost monthly at the moment, with the Eastern Cape being the worst of all. But then if you look at convictions that came out of those, 4 or 5 years worth of reporting, it was less than 7% successful conviction rate. That is extremely low, and it rates almost lower than matters regarding, for example, GBV, murder prosecution, and so on and so forth. And remember, these types of extortion crimes include many other different types of crime. Very often we see charges like defeating the ends of justice, when unfortunately, and it's in the minority, police officers have also involved themselves in this, and often it is done because of intimidation on a local level. In terms of the sectors that are impacted by this, it's obviously the construction sector, and I think there's no one better than my colleague Diane Kolobana that will speak about that soon, because the construction sector has been numbed in some areas with regards to extortion threats. The transport sector, we know about the Intercape bus service that face significant pressure from taxi mafias, and there's no other way to explain them, after they actually murdered some of their bus drivers, wounded many, and even attacked some of the people being transported on those buses just because they wanted control of routes between the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. We look at municipalities in the Western Cape itself, in the city of Cape Town. People have literally been murdered by members of these extortion mafias because municipalities wouldn't want to give in to paying extortion money to these different organizations. The security sector, we recently saw the underworld figure in Cape Town, or let's say alleged underworld figure, Mark Liffman, that was murdered recently in an assassination. where he himself had many question marks regarding a security company that he was involved in different parts in and around Cape Town with regards to extortion, and how they allegedly forced their way into controlling parts of protection in nightclubs and nightlife industries in and around the city. The mining sector, we already know this, and it's actually come to a point where some people are even advocating for illegal mining to be seen as a normal business proposition. I heard again in the media this morning that it's almost spoken of as something that's just purely curbing poverty, where we know that the violence and the way that communities are terrorized by some of these illegal mining groups has really increased quite dramatically over the years. And then I think the most important is vulnerable communities. I think the perception is often created that it's just rich and wealthy businesses or business people that are impacted. But it's important to acknowledge that very often the poorest of the poor are forced to also pay protection money. Not far from here, in places like Nyanga, Langa, Guguletu, elderly people are sometimes forced to pay extortion or protection money just for having a DSTV dish outside your house, or for having a parking space in front of your house, or having a TV inside your house, which obviously is absolutely unacceptable. Now, the Democratic Alliance takes this extremely seriously, because not only does this encourage a whole list of other crimes, it actually holds our entire economy hostage. And the first crucial intervention that we have proposed, and that I've already seen has influenced policy on a national level, that it's taken very seriously by the police as well, and it's an opportunity, I think, brought to us by the Government of National Unity, is centralized intelligence gathering and analysis. The first part of this intervention that is critical to us is to really capacitate the National Anti-Economical and Extortion Crime Task Team. If we don't have specialized skills in a team like that, and also the right amount of specialized people to fulfill their duties in such a unit, we cannot expect for data to be analyzed in a way to make it into operational intelligence. What do I mean by that? We need to make sure that the information and reports that we get can be verified, and then after that used in order to arrest and then obviously prosecute the relevant people that are involved. We need to make sure that we implement regional anti-extortion units, and with the DA-led City of Cape Town, it is one of the very few local governments that have put such an extortion unit into place, or anti-extortion unit, and we have seen some success. But currently, without the adequate support from the South African Police Service, it does make it difficult to see results. We also believe that this leads to a devolution, and I'll share more about that later, but we need to spread the work pressure across the different levels of government, not only to alleviate pressure on the national budget, but this is a critical thing, that with crime intelligence, we can actually lessen the burden for national government and make sure that we don't put too much pressure on already underperforming budget. The last 2 or 3 points regarding intelligence is to make sure that we've got a centralized database. Different entities need to speak with each other. It's impossible for us to run this properly if different policing entities, the private sector, and even community structures don't have a way of centralizing information for that to be verified, to make sure that we know what the bigger picture looks like. This will ensure continuous data analysis for us to know what we're dealing with and who we're dealing with, and will also help us to make sure that we're not only trying to arrest ground level, let's call them foot soldiers, but that we actually are led to arrest and convict the relevant kingpins. After that, and this is the last part of the intelligence component, it's enhancing communication and information sharing. We need to make sure that, for example, the extortion hotlines aren't only there to report complaints, but that feeds into a system where information can be verified and built into operational intelligence, something that can be used in a network that can be shared with the relevant authorities in order to take on the relevant issues. The second part of the DA's policy specifically focused on enhanced community reporting and support mechanisms. Now, this plugs in to the intelligence part and sometimes might not be seen as intelligence, but I think is a vital building block for solid intelligence structures. The first part of this intervention is capacitating and enhancing the National Anti-Extortion Hotline. Actually, we spoke about this in the police committee yesterday. And it's critical for us that there's a centralized place, as I said just now, where all of this information feeds into in order to be able to follow up. Now, so far, there is an increase in people reporting it, and it does seem that South Africans are becoming more comfortable with using these hotlines. The challenge that we have is to make sure that it is followed up on a local level and that the relevant people are held to account when it comes to actually following up the cases. There's no use in having a hotline that isn't actually used to see some kind of an operational success. We need to make sure that we've got the relevant community partnerships. Something that's important about this is that we don't just see, for example, from a parliamentary point of view, that we will have some kind of a public engagement or hearing where people might actually put themselves at risk. So we need to make sure that we've got the relevant partnerships with community policing forums, neighborhood watches, other entities, churches, schools, etc., in order to get the relevant information and build it into this communication structure, which again will lead to the building block of combating this, which is intelligence-led policing. Training community liaison officers, critical, but once again, we need to make sure that we protect them. We can't expect community liaison officers to take this risk and to speak out because it's as simple as them really being assassinated. As I said about the ophthalmologist earlier, it's one of thousands of examples where people receive death threats, and unfortunately, and especially in poorer communities, it seems that those threats aren't always taken as seriously, and we cannot sit or be in a situation where someone's life counts less because of the circumstances in which they live. And then the last part of the community part of the policy is providing victim support and protection. And this is something that must be done in cooperation with the MPA as well. Victim or witness protection does not fall under the police, but it is something where I think better collaboration can do quite a bit. And it's yet another part where the responsibility of policing and witness protection can potentially be devolved. It is an opportunity to strengthen the cooperation between, for example, metro police units across the country, provincial governments, police oversight and community safety ministries, to see what we can do in order to incorporate those different structures to protect people, to support victims and those that report the relevant information. Before I hand over to my colleague, Diane Kohler-Barnard, I want to use the example of what the city of Cape Town did. In October 2023, the city launched an anti-extortion campaign under the slogan, "Enough is enough." And with that, they established a 24-hour hotline and a adequate reward system to actually encourage people and residents to assist the city and other authorities in combating extortion. Now, I think if we get to this point, it now questions what happens next. So what the city then did, they commissioned a new facility protection officer law enforcement unit. And this basically meant that there would be a static but also a mobile response that can immediately support the relevant properties or persons that report these types of issues. Before I continue with the rest, I'm going to hand over to Diane Kohler-Barnard. And with the introduction, I must say, specifically regarding the construction mafia, I think Diane will give the best overview of where all of this started, because extortion is not new in South Africa. And she was one of the people that many years ago already warned that this would snowball into what it is today. And it's as though it fell on deaf ears. And unfortunately, I like to believe that it was deliberately ignored because many people in senior positions were unfortunately involved in extortion. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Ian. Take your seat.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you. Indeed, the crime of extortion really began in Umlazi in eThekwini, KwaZulu-Natal. That was in 2014, and it was so successful that by 2019, the construction industry had lost 63 billion rand. Massive. And as a result, now, today, we see many of our top construction firms have simply shut down, either left the country or collapsed completely. At that stage, 183 projects felt the impact, the invasions. It started because of a proposal at an ANC Congress that 1/3 of all tenders should be provided for local business. That never became law, but somehow it became urban legend. And mobs of 50 people odd would arrive at a construction site and demand, you have to give us 1/3 of the jobs. And of course, they didn't have the qualifications. They weren't qualified bricklayers, plumbers, etc., tilers, anything in the construction industry. Many of the companies attempted to train some people as an appeasement mechanism for the local communities, but it very soon morphed into a situation where they didn't want 1/3 of the jobs, they wanted 1/3 of the tender in cash. And one example, prime example, is the casino, private casino on the Durban beachfront. That project was stalled for over a year because men arrived in 4 or 5 large black 4x4s, drove straight through the gates, came very heavily armed, all had AKs, and they had a bullet, and they put it on the desk of the construction site manager and said, that's for you. We know where your wife is. We know where your children go to school. And either you give us 1/3 in cash or we're coming for you next. That bullet is for you. We've got one separately for each of your family members. And, of course, he got up and left, and that was the last they ever saw of him. He, as did many of the construction site people, they simply said, my life is worth more than this, and they left. So projects like that, multi-million rand projects that would attract tourism, gave inevitably huge numbers of employment opportunities to locals, were simply shut down. And it morphed from that into a situation where extortion of not only the construction sites, but as my colleague Ian said, into virtually every other area. Once it was realized by a single community that you could actually take things for nothing by simply threatening people, it became enormous. Now, I've gone to many international congresses on global syndicates, and that's exactly the way this has evolved. Global syndicates, they know no borders. They literally have so much money. Their ability to outdrive, outfly, outshoot every single aspect of any policing in probably every country. They will come in under the radar, land on an airstrip that no one really knows about. They will exchange drugs for bodies, children, whatever they're transporting, and off they go. And the South Africa knows nothing. They drive into our open little harbours, and you think it's a lovely place with restaurants, and they're actually dropping off and fetching. And they know no country borders. They will drive straight over the borders into our neighbouring countries through Africa, trading what they need to trade to make their billions of rands. It's very hard to pin down because there are no passports involved, there are no border checks involved. They simply ignore everything in that way. So how do we fight this? Well, the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill that we went through in the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, which I also serve on, that bill goes a long way to strengthening various entities and to sorting out the State Security Agency, which is still quite a state. But the importance of intelligence-led operations, in the same way it's important to run a prosecution-led operation. You know exactly what you need to get out of it a result that will fly through the courts. You can't get to court and say, oh, but you haven't got this, you haven't got that. That is just amateursville, and I fear it happens far too often in our courts today. So we need to regularly deploy intelligence-led task teams to do proactive raids. This business of always responding to a drama is just not proper policing. Proactivity is everything. And so proactive raids, syndicate leaders are inevitably well known to the local communities, and doing raids on their premises, on their properties. I fear that in many instances, when they go to do raids, the SAPs, few people know about the raid. They keep it as quiet as they can. But 9 times out of 10, by the time they get there, the entire premises has been stripped. There's nothing there. So the intelligence is coming out of the police station to the criminals who are paying them off on a regular basis. That is a huge issue, has to be dealt with by SAPs themselves. sadly, it's going very slowly in that regard. So those operations should be gathering evidence, arresting key players, shutting down those extortion networks, both financially and operationally. Second, we're looking at multi-agency coordination. It is a huge issue. You sit in any committee and you find this lot are working in their silo and that entity is working in their silo, and there's virtually no communication. The GLAB that I referred to, the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill, gives a lot of strength to NICOC, the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee. It's very ably run by Ambassador Gab Nzimanga, and yet it's had no teeth. And at last, the bill, once the President signs it, will give strength to that entity that will pull all of those intelligence agencies together at last. And so we can hopefully never have a repeat of the 21 riots in KZN, which 600 billion rand later, most of eThekwini and much of the surrounds were destroyed. So that was literally a blunder of note, where one entity didn't know what the other entity was doing, and the army had to come in and try and clean up, and the police seemed to have evaporated. It was a catastrophe for this country. So putting it all together, multi-agency coordination, and that is including not only SAPS Hawks, but also NPA, financial institutions. They're under huge risk these days. 500 million can be sucked out of any of our banks at a moment's notice. To trace the extortionist financial flows, that's the big thing. Seize their assets, shut down criminal enterprise along the way. And the use of the Financial Intelligence Center, the FIC, and special forensic auditors is crucial. Crucial, and that can be the key to breaking a lot of these syndicates. Then comes conducting surveillance and undercover operations. Might seem like an obvious, but covert surveillance and undercover officers, it's something that needs a great deal of expertise. And I fear in many entities, expertise is not valued, and in fact is in some entities being gotten rid of as we speak. But to pick up the evidence against those extortion rings, one has to be inside, and that is a highly dangerous place to be, and needs really, really top experts to do this. But that's how to break these syndicates, and investigating mechanisms and legislative reforms that will improve the cooperation between the law enforcement and the telecommunication companies. In some instances, they literally shut down and say, we're not having you anywhere near us. But in other instances, they're more than happy to assist when it comes to intercepting calls via their networks, Vodacom, etc. It obviously has to go through a judge to ensure that it is legal. But in many instances, it can be used as evidence and crack a case wide open. It's not used, I don't believe, sufficiently. Finally, publicizing offenders through naming and shaming. I'm sure you've all seen, every time there's a big arrest of a really well-off person, they will take, certainly in KwaZulu-Natal, they take to hospital within about 8 minutes. They bounce in and out of the system. They go to a 5-star hotel. They will stay there as long as it takes, claiming any illness you can imagine. And when they do come to court, they're suddenly on a drip in a wheelchair, trying to appeal to somebody somewhere. But I fear that these things are dragged on so long that there's very little public interest in it by the end of the issue. I mean, look at the Tosh and Panda issue. It was from theft during the FIFA World Cup. And here we are, 14 years later, and he's only now starting to really appear in court. He's been laughing at the system all these years and continuing on his way. So we need to get them named, shamed, out there. I don't believe we use our public service broadcasters sufficiently in showing these people up for what they really are. And we have the SABC, all the radio stations, the television stations, and we should be pushing, saying, don't get involved with this, because when you do, this is what will happen to you. You will go to jail for your 20 years, whatever. Don't do it. We have to start very soon, because the moral fiber of this country is being eroded at a rate of knots, and we have to stop it in its tracks, and that process starts today. Thank you very much. May I hand over to my colleague Lisa, also from the Police Portfolio Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. In order for us to combat this growing scourge in our country that we all know is got its claws in every fibre of our communities, we must be proactive to prevent and detect extortion at an early stage. Preventing extortion before it occurs through public education, proactive policing, legislative reforms, and early intervention is exceptionally vital. In order for us to achieve this, we propose the following interventions. Extortion risk assessments must be conducted regularly to assess such risks in businesses and communities, especially high-risk industries like transport, hospitality, and building are vitally important to prevent extortion. In many provinces, the extortion mafia with water tankering is massive, and this leaves our communities without water on a daily basis. Water is a need that everybody has, and they cannot go without water. And these extortionists are tampering with taps, they're breaking the infrastructure, and they're just causing the water tankering to take place on a daily basis. So we have to ensure that that is something that we look at as soon as possible. Launching public awareness campaigns through social media, community events and broadcasts and print media channels to educate businesses and residents about extortion tactics must be reported, and we must support these networks that are available. We do, as my colleague Diane said, have the SABC at hand. They are our public service broadcaster, and they are at our disposal of the country, and they should be informing our communities regularly of these risks and what extortion actually is, because many people don't understand that extortion is asking money from the lady on the street where she happily sells her vegetables to feed her company 10 rand to sit on the corner. That is extortion. That is not protective money. It is not protection. It is not helping your community. They're extorting somebody that desperately needs that money vitally. We definitely need rapid response teams to be implemented within the SAPS that are trained to deal with extortion cases. These teams must be responsible for quickly responding to reported incidents, gathering intel, and providing immediate support to victims. Extortion in most cases is not something that takes place once or twice. It is an ongoing scourge that takes hold of a community, and once those tentacles or that cancer infiltrates the community, it just keeps growing and growing, and people must be aware of what extortion in these areas look like. We should be using proven technology to prevent, combat, investigate crime. Why don't we take advantage of the latest technology available in the world, not just in our country? This technology must include CCTV cameras, video cameras in helicopters, gunfire detection technology, drones, which we desperately need, integrated and computer-aided call taking and dispatching, and biometric fingerprinting tools. We wait months for fingerprints, my apologies, and it's completely unacceptable that we wait so long for basic things like fingerprints. The administration must be streamlined through online electronic reporting and capturing platforms and systems. Crime reporting must be made easier. It must be less time-consuming to make sure that people that do come and report crimes are helped fast, and that they don't waste their time and think that they're going to leave, because at the end of the day, nothing is actually going to happen with a case that they have reported. This also would encourage victims to report crimes and assist authorities much quicker if they are assisted quicker. Crime hotspots must be prioritized through predictive policing. Everybody knows where these crime hotspots are. Everybody in the community knows where crime is taking place. Why are we not speaking to these community members to find out where these hotspots are and ensuring that we send the right detectives and the right resources to these areas to ensure that this doesn't take place? These resources must be targeted to make sure that we obtain the best crime prevention results at our disposal. We must definitely increase officers' quality by ensuring that they're meticulously screened, which doesn't happen enough. They must go through rigorous appointment processes, and they must be continuously trained to enhance them. Just as we enhance technology, we must enhance our manpower, our boots on the ground, to be able to make sure that they know what they should be doing. So we must do that. We must enhance the capacity of our detectives. The SAPS needs to increase the number of detectives on the ground and lessen their caseload. Currently, detectives are sitting with between 300 and 500 cases on their desk at any given time. This is a mammoth task, and we can never expect a detective to get through all of this and make sure that they do a good job. Because at this stage, while they are really good detectives and they are trying to get through the caseload, it is not humanly possible for them to do that. And then, given the history of the political interference in the SAPS and the intelligence areas of crime intelligence and the State Security Agency in South Africa, we urgently need reporting methods that must be introduced to stop political interference and attempts when they occur. We cannot have political interference into this SAPS. While you might think that extortion, much like politics, does not touch every day of your lives, it does, like politics, affect every day of your life. You might not be interested in politics and extortion, but is clearly very much interested in you. Extortion rackets have spread like cancer over South Africa and is severely damaging our economy, our moral fiber, and our daily lives. The infiltration of extortion into our daily lives affects our safety and access to basic rights like water, and has a massive impact on the day-to-day business of South Africa and the economy. South Africa needs a formalized anti-extortion plan with proper measures put in place to ensure that we are safe and secure, and that a conducive environment is being created to ensure constant growth in our economy and a means for the poorest of poor to put food on their tables, either by being gainfully employed or by being able to sell their homegrown veggies and the lovingly made biscuits that they've made at home in a safe area, so that they are enabled to put meat on their table at night for their loved ones without having to share their meager profits with extortionist bullies. We call on all South Africans to take hands and say that enough is enough and stand up towards these blackmailing bullies, because only once we take a stand as a nation will we be able to stand up and say we've had enough, and we will be able to change the trajectory of our country. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Ian Cameron.
Before I wrap up the actual strategy, I just want to summarize one or two things that we've discussed today. The first part is to understand how broadly the impact of extortion actually affects civilization or civilians in South Africa. You know, people, especially on community level, I don't think we understand that completely. And as I listed earlier, the police identified 7 specific sectors or extortion classifications that should be looked at. We know the construction sector, transport, municipalities, the security, specifically private security sector, the mining sector, businesses, and obviously vulnerable communities. It's important to understand that it negatively impacts the economy, society, and politics. And as my colleague just said, it impacts us on every single level of society. We might not always notice it immediately, but it potentially means that costs of very basic goods will rise. It means that we will have a generally lower quality of resources, insufficient resources that we may need on a daily basis. Something as simple as buying bread might double in price because of the impact of extortion. It means that we'll have slower economic growth, inadequate capital formation. We certainly will have decreased foreign investment. And then also we would have reduced tax revenues. And this has basically become a different tax stream completely on its own. And it basically then threatens and weakens any form of government legitimacy. Socio-politically, extortion distorts decision-making, and it basically restricts citizens' rights. We already have to deal with high levels of individual or different types of violent crime, but now this has become an additional threat that encapsulates all of those different types of crime. Now, the last point of this strategy or policy or plan that I want to go over is the improved prosecution of legal frameworks. And I honestly believe that this document can serve as the foundation for combating extortion in South Africa. And if we work on this as being the main building block to combat extortion, I honestly believe that we can turn the tide when it comes to changing what we're currently experiencing with regards to extortion in South Africa. Finally, in terms of improved prosecution, I said earlier that over the last 5 years it was less than 7%. It's critical that we have dedicated anti-extortion prosecution teams. Now, within the MPA, obviously, it's critical that there's dedicated capacity to focus on extortion, and these units should receive ongoing training on extortion laws, legislation, case-building techniques, and evidence handling. And obviously, they need the relevant protection too. Unfortunately, we've come to a space, and it's like this with extortion. I recently spoke to a prosecutor that I'm not going to name in the Eastern Cape, who said that their lives are threatened almost daily when they tackle extortion-related cases. And to me, it seems that the punishment for being involved in extortion doesn't actually measure up compared to the damage of the actual crime. Recently, someone that I knew quite well in Gugulethu, she was the deputy chair of the CPF, later the chair of the CPF, Auntie Goofy Lulama, was actually murdered after started blowing the whistle regarding police involvement in not only corruption, but specifically with regards to extortion and protection rackets in Gugulethu. Now, these dedicated anti-extortion prosecution teams must work hand in hand in terms of investigative capacity with the police, but also themselves. And the MPA recently did launch the investigative directorate of their own, and I think that can make a major impact. But currently, we're not seeing the urgency to really tackle the challenge head on. We need to fast-track extortion cases. For too long, some of these so-called kingpins manage to frustrate the process to the point where South Africans just feel like you never see a result. We often hear, and it is encouraging to see more arrests with regards to extortion, so too with regards to officials, specifically police officers that are involved. And many people say that it shows you how corrupt the police are. I don't agree with that. I feel that it's actually a very good thing that police are acting against those that have caused such damage in the South African police service, and that we're seeing good cops step forward to act against these criminals. We need to fast-track these cases because they hold communities and businesses hostage. We need to advocate for tougher laws on extortion. So when we do these amendments, a good example is kidnapping for ransom, which is basically a form of extortion. It is a very lucrative business as well because you're guaranteed of some kind of cash return very quickly, and if you are caught, you'd be lucky to face more than or less than 5 years. It just seems like the punishment doesn't measure up to the offence, as I said earlier. Then also in terms of providing support for victims during legal proceedings, it's very clear that when you go to court, it's a very cold and unwelcoming experience. And many times victims eventually give up because they are so scared of going to court and that they are intimidated by the accused. And worse, recently, I don't know if you all remember the case of the Deputy President's VIP protectors. We hear that they've now been suspended without pay because of frustrating the process. So hopefully they'll be out of the police soon. But with that specific case, at the very court in Johannesburg where that case is being heard, cops that were, one of the police officers that were going to testify with regards to corruption that was also linked to extortion was assassinated just a few months ago on his way to court. And it's yet another example that even those that want to do the right thing within the police don't always receive the protection that they need. Then implementing watching brief units. We've seen that in the Western Cape government led by the Democratic Alliance, we've seen that this is a critical part of oversight, and it gives us some kind of strategic feedback that we can use to go back, influence policy and hold the executive to account. Then the last 2 points before I conclude is introducing an electronic case management system. It's very frustrating at the moment that the CAS system, or the case management system of the South African Police Service, is not a system that draws us the entire nexus or the whole chain of the process for us to know where the case is at, how is it developing. And I'm not speaking about compromising the case. I'm simply speaking of a way that people can be told and kept up to date with the relevant developments in such a matter. And as Diane said earlier, sharing information as arrests happen, shaming the relevant people for being involved in this. It's almost as though we want to be gentle with some of these criminals who wouldn't hesitate to kill any one of us at any time for challenging them when they want to commit these offences. Then the last part is advocating for greater decentralization of policing. And there's no better place for this event to be held today than in the city of Cape Town, because I can tell you now that when I spend time with, for example, the Metro Police in the city, it is extremely encouraging to see the professional way in which they conduct themselves, the way that Metro Police conduct operations, the professional way in which their systems work, the fact that their vehicles almost always work, it's close to 100%. They are dressed well. You get a sense of pride and integrity when you speak to these officers, and they are proud of the uniform that they wear. We need to make sure that we boost the morale of SAPs, and I've mentioned this before, and support the good cops that are there. And one of the best ways to do this is to assist in capacitating them by giving more responsibility in terms of police management to provincial and to local government, to make sure that, for example, a detective, as Lisa said earlier, doesn't have 300 to 500 dockets. Why can't, for example, gun offences or extortion offences be investigated by someone in Metro Police that is a qualified detective that would be able to go directly to the prosecutor and assist with making sure that we cross all the T's, dot all the I's with the process to make sure these criminals land behind bars? There's no reason for detectives to be overburdened the way that they are. Yes, budget is sometimes challenging, but again, we have these capacities. We can help on a provincial and on a local government level. Why not open this up and ensure that we have all hands on deck to assist? And then in terms of that decentralization, also look for partnerships. The private sector is already playing a massive role in capacitating police where they aren't necessarily sufficient, and they're playing a huge role in ensuring we put criminals behind bars. We can do so much more if those that are expert in certain fields can help more with this. The last example I would like to mention with this is something like forensic capacity. For a long time, we have said, let's devolve some of this forensic capacity. Currently, the police has a backlog of just over 70,000 cases with regards to DNA testing. That is something that can be assisted with, for example, by the University of Cape Town, who've got a state-of-the-art facility for DNA testing, but currently aren't being allowed and supported to process that evidence. And it's something that can immediately alleviate significant pressure on the police and on the budget, and make sure that we can again boost the morale of the good cops that are hanging in there and working so hard. I'm going to summarize. I think if we implement this, we've got 5 basic steps that form part of this plan. And this 5-point plan consists of, firstly, a centralized intelligence gathering analysis process. This is critical with regards to sharing with the private sector, local and provincial government. It includes enhanced community reporting and support mechanisms. It includes a targeted operation and disruptions of syndicates. For far too long, as Diane said earlier, we react to everything. We can disrupt a lot of this as it happens. We're seeing it happen in KZN. I had a fantastic discussion this week with one of the senior prosecutors in KZN, and the fruit of their work over the last 2 years is setting a new standard for the way that the MPA and police can work together and should work together. And all the provinces in the country can actually learn so much by the way that the MPA has targeted certain criminal investigations along with the police and how they cooperate to tackle the challenge. The last 2 points is proactive prevention and early intervention, and then improved prosecution and legal frameworks. We have to look at things like SARS. The way that we tackle some of these kingpins can be due to tax evasion. There are many creative ways in which we can make it extremely uncomfortable for them to get alternative revenue streams. And by implementing this plan, I'm sure that the Democratic Alliance will lead the way in changing or turning the tide against extortion in South Africa.
Thank you very much, Ian. Now, colleagues, there you have it. The message is very clear on our side. It cannot be that even the supply of basic services, which are the basic rights, human rights of South Africans, is now hampered by a criminal syndicate across the country. And this is why what we have tabled here today is a clear message that says we want to use intelligence-based operations to do away with extortion activities and fundamentally eradicate and dismantle criminal networks. We're not just sitting back doing so. We've given you a 5-point plan on how to do so. The only thing that needs to happen is for this document to not just be read, but for the police ministry to copy, paste it, roll it out, and make sure that we fundamentally deal with this problem once and for all. For too long have we been having conversations. You should have had the plan. The DA now has the plan. We're giving it to you. Roll it out and make sure that South Africans are safe, that children grow up in safer communities, that criminals are behind bars and not freely roaming around the streets of South Africa. That is what we want to do. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you guys who have availed themselves here today. For those of you who are joining us online, thank you again for your continued support. There will be an opportunity for one-on-one engagements for colleagues of the media who are here today with the leadership here. And for now, that is it. Thank you very much.
I